this screencast is going to begin with Chapter 9, the Civil War. I just want to remind you that we want to remember December 20th of 1860, the date that South Carolina secedes from the Union, as they are the first state to do so. We will kind of consider that date as the start of the Civil War, even though there's no actual fighting just yet. These following states, excluding, of course, South Carolina, which is the first one, will follow suit and also secede from the Union in different dates through Tennessee in June of 1861, so 6 months later. You don't need to memorize all of them. You want to take note of which states have left: Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee. You want to consider the region they are located in on the map. We have discussed most of these states on the U.S. map already, but I kind of want you to be aware of the region of the southern states that are leaving, because they are kind of all connected. Individually, they have left, but together they will join together and form the Confederate States of America, aka the Confederacy. So they have individually left, but they're kind of sticking together as this like loose union of states, because together they are stronger than they would be individually, going against the U.S. government. So that is what the Confederacy is, and these are the states that are included in that. A note to say that this is when in history certain farmers in the western region of Virginia will not want to secede with the rest of the state of Virginia, so they will form their own independent state and remain in the Union as West Virginia. That's when West Virginia comes into existence. Okay, and I'm going to quickly introduce the Confederacy leadership that we'll be talking about for the rest of this chapter. The Confederate States will jointly elect a president to represent them, and that president is Jefferson Davis, with Alexander Stephens elected the vice president, and the official capital city of the Confederacy is established at Richmond, Virginia. Okay, I want to talk about Fort Sumter, because Fort Sumter is actually where fighting is going to break out between the northern and southern armies for the first time. So Fort Sumter was an American fort in South Carolina, okay, right outside of like the Charleston area, and there are American troops, like soldiers, at this fort, because remember, just a few months ago, South Carolina was one of the states in the United States of America. So there are, Union or Northern soldiers in that fort, and South Carolina is demanding that the troops in that fort leave and evacuate, because they are currently in an area that is no longer their jurisdiction, because they're in South Carolina, which has now been deemed in their own eyes part of the Confederacy. Keep in mind that the United States doesn't have to see it that way, and we'll kind of talk about that political predicament, but just because the South Carolina government and the other southern states have seen that they are independent and stated that they are independent, the other parts of the United States don't necessarily see it that way, and the president doesn't have to necessarily agree with that either. So when Lincoln officially is inaugurated, there are still American forces holding out, literally holding down the fort at Fort Sumter. Even though South Carolina is demanding that these U.S. soldiers leave, they have not evacuated yet. And Lincoln will start to send both supplies and troops, additional troops to that fort. And he says he's not going to use the troops he has unless South Carolina retaliates and tries to attack, any of the U.S. ships being sent to this fort. And nonetheless, fighting will break out, and it's going to take a couple of days of fighting, but eventually the American troops that are at Fort Sumter do surrender to the Confederacy and do surrender to the South Carolinian, army that's there attacking them. But that's the first official fighting of the Civil War. And again, it's kind of started in the situation of not really knowing who's in control, because South Carolina is claiming to be independent, but the United States has not officially acknowledged that, secession. Thus, they are determining they're going to fight for the South and fight for their return, okay? I want to end today just kind of talking about the two sides of this war, so we can understand them moving forward in this chapter. The North will be referred to throughout this chapter as the United States, but since they did not leave the Union, they are still part of the main country, the U.S., or we also refer to them as the Union States. They are politically led by Abraham Lincoln. One of their most well-known generals is Ulysses S. Grant, as Grant will go on to become one of the future presidents of the United States. And another well-known Union general is William T. Sherman, and we'll talk about him and his fighting strategy later in the chapter. He was actually a president of what is now LSU, when it was an all-boys military academy. To kind of compare that to the South is known as the Confederacy or the Confederate States of America. Obviously, I mentioned that Jefferson Davis was their president, but of course the chief general of the Confederate Army is Robert E. Lee, and we'll talk about him a good bit as well. Okay, so to look at kind of their advantages and their action plans, the northern advantages are that they have more people, more factories, that leads to more food production. They also have a more extensive railroad system to transport goods and supplies for the war effort, and they have an established government. The southern advantage is that cotton is still ruling the southern economy. European nations are heavily dependent on southern cotton, so they're going to still get a lot of money from Europe for the time being. They also have very highly rated generals and military soldiers. They have very motivated soldiers in this war since they feel like they're fighting for their way of life. From the northern perspective, in terms of their action plan, they have the more difficult job because they have to defeat every single state that seceded from the Union. They have to conquer the South to win the South. They have to force it back into the Union. The South just has to survive and outlast. The South is not trying to win back the North, to defeat the North. The South is trying to fight off the North. So in that regard, I'd say the action plan is kind of in the Southern favor because they don't have to do any conquering. They just have to defend their land. Okay? And the last little note is just addressing border states, which Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri are all border states. These are all slave states that did not leave the Union. They did not secede. Yes, they do have slavery in their states, but their economies were not as dependent on it as the other Confederate states, so they don't really feel the need to leave over the slave issue, and they don't really take an open side, but there will be fighting in them, as we'll discuss. They are the site of fighting, even though they don't take open sides, but mostly they're still loyal to the Union since they weren't willing to secede with the others. All right, write down any questions you have, and I will discuss this more with you all tomorrow.